Ladies and gentlemen, kids of all ages, it is another Wednesday, another episode of the Mattriarchy.
Yeah.
Today, we got a dual Matt version today, and I decided Hey, how's it going? Matt Crotts is joining to us all the way from the land of the Gators.
Yes, the lizard swamps.
Absolutely, and I was gonna put up our little theme song thing, but I forgot that I hadn't loaded it into StreamYard because it's the wrong format, and I didn't load it up ahead of time. So I spent 30 seconds realizing I couldn't do it, and then the timer went off, and I was like, oh well, I guess we'll just go. We'll just run with it. It'll probably
Going straight
be fine.
to live. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
Hey, Metal, you got here.
Howdy.
Oh, howdy. Great to see you.
I think everybody's used to me being about 10 minutes late, and I actually got here on time today.
I was about to hop in beforehand, but our water is currently off and it won't be turned back on until like tomorrow. So I had to go through the longest route of the entire house because I'm at the very end of the hall from my closet where I moved my entire office space into to be a little more soundproof. To the backyard, only to walk by the corner where my closet is, and then all the way back. So,
man, you that's some crazy frontier living you're in the middle of there at the minute.
Yeah, I'm used to it.
That's rough. Anyhow, today we are here to talk about me. No, that's not correct. We're here to talk about my universe. And I also, before we get started though, I got some stuff in the mail. You guys want to see what I got in the mail?
Oh, please.
Sure.
Okay. So these three things came in the post, single package, right there, from Mrs. H. The
Oh, wow.
Bond size of her webcomic. My superhero power sucks, but I make
awesome.
the best of it.
She's a great artist.
And this is such a good. Have you read this story, Matt?
No.
Oh, this is so much fun.
I've seen her post. Yeah.
So much fun. And then we have a little fan comic and art of Common America, and a little Coco trading card. Look at that!
Wow, beautiful.
Yep. So sweet. Now I was expecting this because I bought it. I was not expecting this, so that was a surprise to me. Oh, and the card is also new. But the really fun thing about the comic is it has a little fan comic that I wrote in there.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that'll be part of our conversation. All the collaborative projects you've worked on.
Yeah,
that's a topic in itself.
Yeah, this was a fun little bit, and it was Mrs. H and her daughter had put together a little like 3 or 4 page little gag story, and we had talked about wanting to collab on something for a while, but didn't quite. We were trying to pick the right kind of project or whatever. And I said, I have this idea for a little short Common America fan comic. What do you think? She said, let's do it. So we did, and it was fun. So
that's right. I remember you guys starting that off.
It might feature everybody's favorite Lancashire boy in it. So
great. The universes are colliding.
So that was fun. So I don't really have an agenda on today's thing. I wanted to leave it open for people to ask me questions and to get me talking on stuff. Fizz is here. Flying Saucer was here. I don't know if he still is or not. And of course we're here. And guys, if you guys have any questions about stuff, want to interject on things as it goes, we're here to talk about our deep lore, our secret ideal comic secrets, and stuff we've been cooking in that kitchen since 2005. So there's all kinds of little stuff that's just under the surface. So
Well, that's okay. Well, because I was excited. I was going to ask you stuff people probably know more about, which is like uh, what got you in to making your own universe and
Okay.
what what you'd recommend to people. Uh, like what would be some entry points to getting into your universe and stuff like that. But would you
All
rather
right. All right.
secrets stuff?
No, that's all good stuff. It's all good stuff. So, we designed Forces to be it's a comedy action story, kind of in the vein of Peter David's Young Justice, right? That's what we're kind of going
Nice.
for, to be kind of an entry point, right? So,
Hmm.
it happens within the big lore of our universe, but it's also a silly comedy story and involves like it's a little bit of best friends on the couch and a little bit of of uh, I don't know what you want to call it, but kind of tried playing with some of those cliches that were out in the early 2000s webcomic scene,
Mhm.
to kind of be a teaser. And what is IC? There you go. Ideal Comics. That's a good question. Ideal Comics is the brand that we started back in 05 when Chris and I'll tell you the story. I wrote about it on the website, but Chris and I both decided in the late 90s, early 2000s, we wanted to make comics. We wanted to be the next Denny O'Neil, the next Chuck Dixon, next James Robinson, name it.
Mhm.
And Chris Claremont, whatever, right? And we spent a couple of years working on pitches and getting rejection letters.
Yeah, as you do.
As you do. My wife said we were collecting rejection letters. So, well, we were getting no luck with the big name people, and there were a bunch of small press comic companies out there, Shooting Star Comics, and I can't remember any other names right now, but they were interested in create our own stuff, but small key stuff, and we were trying to figure out what to do. So we came up, we made a practice of going down to the country kitchen and meeting once a week, and we'd work on each other's pitches, right? We'd write up some pitches, some stories, some skeletons, some script work, and then we'd beat each other up over our stuff. And one day we realized that that there were all these themes in our different stories that we came up with that kind of lived in the same space, right? And I said, well, so we kind of made a pact. It's like, well, let's just figure out what our rules are and make it a universe of it. It'll be great. And, um, uh, and then as we were going along, we still kept getting those rejection letters coming in. Oh, it's not quite what we're looking for, or whatever, right? And then one day Chris says, well, why don't we self-publish? I mean, come on. And that was sort of the end of that. That's what we ended up doing. Welcome, Cartoonicus. And so we decided to just take our stuff and make it our own thing, not just like a subtextual thing that was like unofficial universe, but actually make it into its own deal and everything. So
Can we get there's a piece of this puzzle that's never been completely clear to me, and maybe the chat feels similarly. So who is your co-creator? Like, what's his origin story?
So let me go ahead and load up a thing, and I will do a little deal. So I'm really bad at filling time while I type on stuff. So
yeah, because like this has been explained to me, I think backstage or whatever, but I do think a lot of the audience, it's almost just like vague that you have a co-creator.
Yeah.
The way it's talked about, yeah.
So here we'll present and we'll share screen, and share the screen over here to this Brave tab, and we'll go with there. So here is the About Us page, About Team page on idealcomics.com. It's outdated. We need to update it. We are actually looking to move servers around, and so that's part of that whole story. But this is myself and Chris, and basically it was just kind of the two of us we both are from Scottsbluff, more or less, and worked at Walmart together, and ended up being roommates in a house full of other guys, and we just would talk about comics and stories and games and nerd stuff, and ended up deciding to write together for a while. And I'm out here in the West, and Chris is out in Omaha doing some different stuff right now, and that's the story. So that's us on the page. So
both of you had an interest in, because you mentioned you guys wanted to be the next Chris Claremont and stuff. So you guys are both interested in mainstream comics, but also you said you were interested in web comics and what that was doing in the 2000s. That's interesting. I mean, that in itself is pretty interesting, because those are two different worlds in a way.
Almost paradoxical.
Yeah. Well, that was part of the deal. Is like I was Chris is a bit younger than me, right? So I was born on the tail end of Gen X by anybody's figuring, and Chris is profoundly within the millennial era, right?
Okay.
And his oldest brother, his oldest sibling, and I are the same age. But so Chris was aware of and into the Penny Arcade and Megatopia, if I'm remembering that one right, PvP, and he kind of introduced that to me and said and all that kind of stuff. But I didn't really necessarily get into webcomics until probably 05, maybe 04. But when that kind of came out there, but we were but yeah, so that's kind of Chris was into. He actually had, before we got Forces Down, he was doing a Two Guys on a Couch gamer webcomic called The Adventures of Seth and Murphy, and it's hilarious.
Well, that's fun. So even in your collaboration with Chris Lawton here, you guys were blending your different inspirations and influences. That's pretty cool. That explains a lot. That actually, I'm sure the chat feels the same way. That Ideal Comics, it definitely is kind of having this fun interplay with those two different worlds of American comics.
Yeah, and one of the one of the things, I mean, like we both grew up, of course, with the Sunday Funnies too. And one thing Chris pointed out pretty early is that like web comics were very much in the vein of the strip comics more than they were, your floppy, newsstand comics.
Oh yeah, sure.
And so I think that's definitely a factor in some of the appeal that web comics had for both of us, because that was sort of our introduction to the medium, not necessarily to the genre, if that makes sense.
Oh wow. Okay. So you said you got into web comics around 2004?
Yeah, probably 2003, 2004, somewhere there.
And discovering that Sunday Funnies was a bridge into understanding web comics.
I don't know that I thought of it.
I
don't know if I thought of it that way at the time, but it's something that we talked about in subsequent years, right?
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah. And that's sort of because I've always looked at comics, maybe not always, but pretty long term looked at comics as a medium rather than as a genre, right? So because that's how I got introduced to the medium, was in the Sunday comics in the early 80s, when you'd have Prince Valiant and Shoe, right?
Many genres.
You'd have Doonesbury, and you'd have Mary Hart and Spider-Man, right? These things that are like have nothing in common in terms of the kinds of stories that they're telling, but they are still using that same linguistic way of merging pictures and images.
That's fascinating. So as you guys got into, as you explored,
guilty.
Well, no.
It's,
Kid's
it's
got a
clear
dream.
a guy's got a dream.
So that's so okay, so you guys both had an interest in Sunday comic strips,
Mhm.
and like you said, the Sunday funnies have a storied history of being very of exploring all kinds of genres.
Yep.
And I think Ideal Comics explores a lot. Like it seems like every new arc you guys explore over the years is trying out a different adjacent uh genre in the field and kind of playing with a hybrid approach, right? With one or
Yeah,
two
definitely,
influences.
definitely. I have always loved like cross genre storytelling, right?
Hmm.
Like, I don't know if it's 100% accurate to say this way, but I think one of the first times I really noticed this idea of like cross genre things was the Clue movie with Tim Curry, right?
Oh, funny.
Where it is hilariously funny. It has elements of a spy story, but it's not really a spy story. It has elements of a murder mystery, and it's definitely a murder mystery, and it's 100% a comedy, right?
Hmm.
And well, I mean, and that kind of clued me onto the idea. But like one of my favorite properties from when I was a kid was Inspector Gadget, and it was farce and detective story and adventure story all at once, right?
Hmm.
And it just sort of kind of like that's been part of my jam creatively, is to think about how like these genres can interact and play with each other in different ways. um and it's something that I think we've always tried to do, is to like take that impetus and figure out how we can tell in interesting, compelling stories that work through that. So, and I'm sure, and Mystery Science
Great.
Theater is, of course, a part of is a cog in that machine somewhere too.
Nice.
So, yeah.
So what was the first like long-term arc that you guys explored? Maybe take us back through the time machine to the mid 2000s. Tell us what got you guys like when did all the cylinders start firing
Um.
for your first story?
Okay. So the cylinders kind of started firing when we realized that we had these elements in our universe that were, a little bit grim dark, a little bit, heroic and aspirational, and
Mhm.
a little bit like, comedic, right?
Nice. Yeah.
And seeing how those things can interplay and can build off of each other. And when we started realizing that these pitches like meshed, right? And so one of them that stories, there's a few stories that have not ever been finished. They're just pitches, but they're still so foundational that I'm gonna go ahead and address them.
Mm.
One was a story that Chris had called October Leaves, and that was the foundation that all of our expositioner stories are built on. It's supposed to
Wow.
be like the first expositioner story, and the story of how he went from being, an agent for this paragovernmental, you know, uh, agency of superheroes, to being an outlaw. Right, that was that story. And the other stories that we've told with expositioner, the things that are in process, that we've published over on in Zing 1, we've got an X story, and we've got a couple that are over on Global Comics right now.
Hmm.
But all of those come out from after that. And now that he's an outlaw, how does he keep being a superhero?
Wow.
And that was from October Leaves. Um, so that was one piece of the puzzle. Another piece of the puzzle was a story that I had come up with called "Whom the Gods Destroy," and that is like big 10,000-foot picture of like political intrigue kind of thing, and that's not been finished yet either. But that was where when we felt like we were really working on something that hammered it out there. Um, then
Wow.
then the next, that's like it sounded like I'd be failures, right? But the thing is, those ideas we ended up putting on the back burner because we started working on other projects. and those ones felt more concrete, even though they were built on the same foundations that we were laying in these pitches. And
great.
Right, so we looked at those two stories and a few other little pitches that we were hammering out with on there, and the kind of the third piece of the puzzle was a story that that I finished the script on. We started getting the art done. Our artist flaked out on us. It sat on the bottom of a drawer for years. It's called Reason to Believe, and it is a slice of life story inside of our superhero universe. And it's about like this girl who's out on her own, who is suddenly in the middle of this, and not a participant in, but a witness in the middle of this superhero story, and that went from having just a normal, boring life to being in the middle of this thing, and how she deals and copes with that. And that is something that Star Storyteller is working on.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so after like 2 decades, I went back and revisited the script and reworked the outline, and we are finishing that, and hopefully next year it'll all be done and ready. So that's when we had something that we really felt like it was a thing. And part of the reason it really felt like it was a thing was, as we were working on that project, Chris floated the idea of putting together an anthology and trying to get some artists who are looking to get some credits. And
Nice.
We put together Zing 1, and it was 6 stories, and one of the stories spun out as a sequel to the superhero story that started in Reason to Believe. Not the story that we're telling, but the story that prompted the story that we're telling, if that makes sense, with Reason to Believe. And it involves the former superhero Ophelia and how she deals with her life after the events that kind of spur on a Reason to Believe. And Chris told this heart-wrenching drama with my characters, and I was just so blown over. And you can actually check that out if you guys go over to our Gumroad. You can buy it for $2. You can get that amazing story. And I can't remember the name of it at the minute. But that was built on built on little threads that I had tucked in for texture in a different story. And we started being able to play with each other's characters and inside of this context that we came up with, and it was awesome. So yeah, that was when we really knew that it was a thing, right? That at least that we could appreciate, the pair of us, and other people have told us that it's not the worst thing ever. So but yeah, one of the first steps we did when we decided to do the anthology was we sat down and we wrote up a timeline of the 20th century, of everything that happened in the 20th century. Well, not everything, but the broad timeline, sort of, Time Magazine style timeline of of the 20th century of our comics, and that became the framework for how we put the anthology together. Not everything from the timeline ended up in the anthology, of course, but it's what laid out which stories and how we were going to tell those different stories. So yeah. But as far as like the first big story, I would have to say is actually called Field Day, and it is on you can see it on Global Comics. Field Day is up there, and it's a Force of Good and Evil story, and it's available on Webtoon, and it's available on our forceofgoodandevil.net. With those stories, what happened is the Forces stories before that. Let me back up a little bit. We came up with Forces in 2003, and it was originally intended as a pitch for Mad Magazine. Needless to say, we didn't make the sale. They weren't interested in us and moved along. And so
I can see a little Mad Magazine influence there.
yeah, definitely. And
fun.
they had started a regular comic section. And so our intention was to do like 1-page mini gags that would be something that they could just throw in as filler. And
Nice.
and we thought it'd be a great way to play on the hero tropes, but also play in this, ludicrous mad sandbox. And well, they weren't that interested in that. But one of the things we realized is as we were building our universe over the summer of 05 was that Forces, we never expected that it would work because it was so over the top silly. But we're like, no, I think we can make this work. And Chris suggested that we just draw it ourselves. And it's so silly that even though we can't draw, that it couldn't be hurt by our art because it's so silly and over the top. So that was how that shook out. But in fact, let me go ahead and load up the first Forces pages for discussion here. And we put that out on the web in 2000 and let's see here. There it is. We put this up on the web in 2000, I think the 3rd of January 2006. Not that cover. That cover came later, but we went through and made covers for each of our individual stories. But yeah,
Nice.
There we go. And yeah. So that was the stuff that we decided to show the world to try to lure them into our very highbrow superhero universe. So
Could you tell us a bit about because so there's the comic and then there's how you introduce the world to your comic by this as you kind of go along, could you tell us like where are these comics living at the time? Are they on like idealcomics.com?
Oh yeah, we were at first on Comic Genesis way back in the day.
Nice.
Just after they stopped being a Keen space.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so we were on their Comic Genesis for the first year and almost a year and a half. In the summer of 2007, they had a bunch of server lag problems, and that's when we started forceofgoodandevil.net, and we've been essentially maintained our own website since then.
Yeah.
So, and I still look back and wonder whether or not that was the wisest decision. I mean, there's Comic Genesis still out there. There are people that still visit it, but we left just before there was a major heyday. Once they got their servers situated, 2008, 2009 were huge years for their circulation, and so we kind of left when the comics started getting good, and left when they started getting good. So there was a thing on that. Yeah. So,
but you've also gone to, you said Webtoons.
Yep, we are on Webtoon. We've done a color version of the first calendar year's worth of stories that are on Webtoon right now. And also the most recent storyline, Homecoming, Girls Night Out, is on Webtoon right now. And that Mrs. H and I are doing that one together. And
cool.
Well, that one's actually formatted for Webtoon too, so it actually, unlike the previous ones, which are still comic page.
Oh, neat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'll be collected into. Our plan is if I finish the manga-sized Force of Good and Evil Volume 1, and people like it, and we can sell a few of them, then my plan is to go through the rest of the archives and grayscale / colorize them and get those out there in fun Tonkabon-sized comics. An idea I totally didn't steal from Daniel DeSosa, who will be a guest in 2 weeks. So, but yeah, the way we introduced the universe through the story was just by having elements show up, right? So in the first tale here, we have Chad, we have Greg. They're giving each other grief before this big aptitude test that they've got to take. They're freaked out about it, and here we have Greg is convinced he's failed the test, and then they're asked to stay after, and then a government agent shows up and tells them that they're being sent to superhero or supervillain schools. So, welcome, students. Your test results placed you in a very small category, as you may or may not have surmised. I'm an agent of the federal government. We are in the business of creating superheroes and villains. And so it's page 2, and we've already introduced a shady government organization.
Yeah, it's playing both sides of the superhero divide.
Yeah, and there are complicated storytelling reasons for that we have not revealed yet. It's only been 20 years. We haven't gotten around to revealing that part yet.
I'll bring that up later, but let's put a pin in politics and ideal comics. I think that's an interesting topic to hear from you. But so so I have other questions for you. And in Metal, tell me if, like, please interject if I'm talking too much. But so I'm hearing you guys taking.
Bored. I've chewed his ear behind the scenes for a couple of years.
Listen, I'm just here to sell T-shirts. That's it. Okay.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Wait, really? You have T-shirts for sale?
Yeah, actually, only for this month. I have a design that's going to die. So if you want some FOMO, it's the floating Zeva design that's like the current logo for the website, but without all the graphics, just there. It's on Teespring. You can pick it up on almost anything. And then on the 15th of next month, I'm nuking it. So you have to get it now.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. I'll drop the link in chat. Yeah,
that'll be awesome. That's awesome. Go buy Metal shirt.
So one thing
I don't
you
know
brought
if
up
it'll go into link form, but people can copy paste it.
Get it in there.
There we go.
So you did something that I think probably a lot of people in the chat have some experience in is getting together with a buddy and drawing out a timeline of your story world.
Oh yes.
And you did the 20th century, and that's a challenge because there's an instinct, as I'm sure the chat also knows. Like, there's an instinct to say, okay, well, what kind of world am I telling my story in? I'm going to write a timeline of events of what that story world is. But it sounds it's so deceptively easy to do that. Like, it's a lot more challenging, as everybody knows, than it sounds, because well, like, how do you know what the story world is until you figure out the stories you want to tell in that story world? And I'm interested in how you guys, particularly collaboratively as two writers and creators, thought through what that timeline would look like. Like, did you guys come to, did you have to meet in the middle at times? Did you have to kind of say, well, I'll give you this if you give me that?
Yeah, I think a little bit. I think there was a little bit of some of that.
Yeah.
Part of it was that, especially in those early years, we were really in sync, right? So the idea that we had different flavors of things that we dug on and liked or whatever, but there was just a lot of good energy, right? And
nice.
Appreciating kind of the idea of what superheroes could be. And so part of it was also at its core a superhero universe. So and how does that shake out when you're looking at it? The other thing that we did is that we were both big fans of American superhero comics big two history, right? So we used real comic history to map out those high points, the main high points, right?
Oh, wow.
There's
No
not
kidding.
necessarily like a direct correlation, right? But our first publicly known superhero per se, Al Jin, he first appears in 1938, right?
Okay.
Uh,
hmm
parallel to the publication of Superman in our world.
Yeah. Even I know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so some of those sort of things, looking at it from a early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s lens was how we kind of shaped what the world was looking like. And part of that also comes to one of our big impetuses with doing our own thing in our own way was we also were very much fed up with even back then Marvel was starting to double down and then DC following suit in just like drama farming in the books. So you had
Oh, okay.
one more day, you had
Yeah.
Civil War, you had Kingdom Come, and
Drama
some of those,
farming in the.
right?
That's
Yeah,
funny.
yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good way to
And that's
say it.
where
That
yeah, that's what they're doing. I
characterizes
mean,
the 2000s. Yeah.
yeah, and that had come about because things like the death of Superman and the Clone Saga
Sure.
had been such big numbers goers. And
Yeah.
then as the comics market was shrinking because the price of paper was going up, right? Lots of things were going on with all of that. Marvel lost its shirt trying to nudge the distribution competitors out of their own market.
Yeah. Didn't they go bankrupt in the
Yeah,
late 90s?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It was a Chapter 11. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It was the freeze your assets kind of bankruptcy, but
Mm-hmm.
they did that to try to prevent a hostile takeover that ended up happening anyway. So,
Yeah, right.
yeah. 9/11, fair. Twitless has entered the chat. So
Well, that's interesting. That really speaks that makes a lot of sense that you guys would weave the business of American comics history into
mhm,
your own pantheon and mythology that you're weaving,
mhm.
because Forces of Good and Evil in particular, but Ideal Comics in general is interested in that kind of. There's always there's like a meta commentary in a lot of what you guys write.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's almost like a meta mythology.
Hmm.
Because like a lot of people try to put our comics into a modern mythology, but they just don't serve the same purpose. But you almost take that and within the world turn it into a modern mythology.
Mhm.
So it's like a meta mythology on that level, and that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Well, and some of that comes down to like some of our premises within the universe, right? And for those of you who are longtime readers out there who have read all of our stuff, you might have picked up in when Chad and Greg go to visit the Super University in the uh, what's the name of that story? Old School. It's meant that while Al Jin was the first superhero, that paranorms, as we call them, or superpowered individuals, have always existed as part of humans. They've just always been there. But for a time, they became so rare that people started to believe they were just legendary. And then when the superpowers started reemerging in the early 20th century, it became just part of everyone's life in the knowledge of it. Not necessarily like everybody's super, but everybody is aware that that's real. I mean, you'll see people flying, you'll see people, there was an alien invasion in the 60s, all kinds of stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so our love of comic history and B movies and pop culture just worked its way into those sorts of things pretty organically. So
So okay, so I'm interested. So we've heard a lot. Well, I think we've heard about stories that you care about, that both
mm,
of you and Chris have cared about. Have you? Um, are there stories that you think you've maybe you took too much of a risk on that you feel like you could do differently if you
Where's your
try it again?
redheaded stepchild?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
okay. I mean, well, man, let me think. I will tell you, there was when we were, this is 2009, 2010 in the summer. There was one summer where Chris and I were meeting all the time. I mean, every week, but we were both so busy with our respective jobs and things going on in life that I think it was '09. May have been '08, but that we weren't feeling like we were putting all of ourselves into a story. And the story we told, it was just one of those things where we've got, we have readers coming twice a week. We've got to keep on schedule. We just got to grind it. Not every story can be golden, right? And the story we told was Buckskin Boone in New York City. And there was one point where it was halfway through the story where we're just like, this is going to be trash, isn't it? And normally we have like we had all of our beginnings, middle, and ends laid out. We knew we wanted to do ahead of time, and it was just a matter about filling in the blanks and seeing where we go from there. And so the thing was it was one of those things where it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be great. And like it wouldn't even necessarily be drawn before it was written. Like we'd come up with a rough outline. We knew I knew where the story was going. I knew the end. I didn't have the middle figured out. I knew what the end was. Because I wrote the entire story to tell one joke. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. So we'd figure out what that page was going to be and how that would move us toward the eventual end of the story. And then Chris would pencil it really quick. I'd take it home and ink it. I think I lettered that story too, just so we can get it together with. And we were barely keeping ahead of our production schedule on that one. And after it was over, we closed the door on that one, walked away from it. It was done, right? And later on, about a year and a half later, I went back to reread it, and it just like knocked me out. It was so stupidly funny, and just accidentally so that it was one of those things where I was just amazed at like how we could have put the pieces together in a way that worked so well. And that's the opposite of the question you were asking, but at the time we were just like, we really thought it was just going to be garbage, and but it held up way better than I expected it to. And part of that's because Buckskin as a character is a labor of love for both Chris and I. And that's I think
Buckskin is the best character.
Buckskin Boone is our pastiche. Is everything we love and everything we hate about being from like the Old West, the Wyobraska plains. And so he's a little bit Pecos Bill and a little bit, the guy lived down the street from us.
I need like 20 more Buckskin stories. Okay, just
yeah, I've got some that are in the can. I mean that are in on the agenda down there, but that's a whole thing. But yeah. But as far as redheaded stepchildren, ones that I really am embarrassed about,
It could just be, outliers, stuff that sticks out,
Let's see. I don't know. I can't necessarily think of something that I feel like I flew too close to the sun on. I think maybe that's something that I want other people to tell me about. But that's because it's a hard time to see, right? So
sure.
So because it came largely even the stuff that Chris and I wrote together. A lot of the beginning, middle, and end outlines started with stuff I'd come up with, right? I guess if there is one, I was afraid it was going to be this way. And there's a story called Teaching Mr. Abimelech, where I had just seen the horrible, I can't remember the actress's name who was in it. She's in Pieces of April. She was in Dawson's Creek. She was in Batman Begins. She was married to Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
Katie something or other.
Yeah.
Anyway,
80.
she was in a horrible movie called Teaching Mrs. Tingle, where these kids kidnap their school teacher. And I had seen it. I watched the whole thing. I didn't know why. It was a horrible picture. And I but it was stuck in my head. And so we decided to turn that plot into a farce in villain school, because we're like, they're villains. So like that's the whole thing. And I felt a little guilty about it, but I had so much fun playing with the characters and figuring out how these villain students would capture their super villain teacher and play it all out, that it was so much fun to play with them that I sort of forgot about my shame. So
That's a good story in itself.
Katie Holmes. Thank you, Twitless. That's the right answer.
There you go. Twitless has a we've established most people have about 100 names in their head that they could pull any one time. They're like, oh, I'm familiar with that person. Twitless has some, I don't know. We probably you should add at least 2 zeros.
Yeah.
To the number.
See, my dad is that way when it comes to like specifically people who have been in movies. He could tell you like anyone who's ever been in anything.
That's great.
Yeah,
it's good if you know their name. You don't want to be like me. I'm the person that's just like, oh, that guy. I know that guy.
Yeah. Well, and
but I don't know his name.
Here I am, going through like everything that I can remember she's been in, and I can't remember her name.
Yeah,
I think it's a Katie. I don't know. She used to be married to Tom Cruise.
Yeah, you named like 4 movies she's been in, which is more than
I've
most
never even
people
seen Pieces of April. I knew she was in it.
Pieces of April.
Yep.
What a 2000s name.
Yeah. Well, so here's the only reason I remember Pieces of April. That in our we just got done talking about Scott Pilgrim, and one of my takes away with the Scott Pilgrim thing is why it resonates with me, is because I was a part of our indie music scene here in the early 2000s. I was friends with a lot of the bands, all this kind of stuff. There was a band that was called Pieces of April for like 15 minutes, and I don't know if they picked their name after the band or what it was, and I can't remember what they changed the name to, but these guys they were pretty good for being like a small town band, and I really enjoyed their stuff. And they were pretty cool guys too, on top of that. But
good question in the chat, by the way.
Some of it already has. Do you think there's lore in the story that may never end up seeing the light of day in the comic? Possibly. I mean, I don't think I'm going to live long enough to tell all the stories that we mapped out. So,
and I think if your lore is dense enough, like even if you're not trying to necessarily write everything for story, but you need building blocks for other things that you're doing, I think it's almost inevitable that you're going to end up having enough stuff that just never sees the light of day.
Yep. Like one of the elements is that we have a triumvirate of Golden Age heroes that kind of define the attitudes of our Golden Age, and it's Al Jin, the Night Terror, and the original Gamesman. And the Night Terror has a series, spoilers, whatever. He has a series of battles with a group of paranormal themed villainesses, femme fatales, that are like a villainous gang. And I don't know that we'll ever get to telling those stories. Right? Because I don't know that we'll ever get to telling those stories. But those stories are actually part of the background of forces in ways that you might not even suspect, and form some of the attitudes that some of the characters have that we see develop on that. So I mean, I don't know that I'll ever get those stories told. But there have been hints about them in some of the other stories we've had, but I don't know that we'll ever get all of them told. So,
so
yeah.
What One of the interesting things that you often bring up about your story world is the world itself, like with these these kind of layered narratives, stories behind the story that help us, well, that kind of enrich the reading experience, where things kind of tie in, and maybe story elements that'll never get told are a part of that. But uh, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on individual character arcs that you're proud of or that you're surprised by that you guys have explored. Like
Yeah.
where do
So
you what do you
in
like about?
Forces,
Yeah.
in Forces, we had started with a gag where actually let me find the page it's on here. Let me get to that. So when we created Forces, the conceit of Forces is that there are two friends that have been lifelong friends, and it might be a mystery why, because Greg is a goody two shoes, always does his best, always just keeps his nose to the grindstone. He's obsessed about doing the right thing, right? Doing the proper thing. And Chad is the big man on campus. Everyone loves him. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's always thought of himself as a badass. He doesn't connect to people. His only real friend is Greg, and that's all that he cares about. But everyone, they look up to him, and or most people look up to him. But he always thought, when they found out supervillain, superhero, Greg's like, I'm going to be a hero. That's it. I've always wanted to be the good guy. And with Greg, with Chad, he was like, oh, I'm definitely destined to be a villain because I'm just the roughest, toughest, meanest guy I know. And they end up going to the opposite schools. Greg goes to villain school, where he's constantly assaulted and beat up, and Chad goes to hero school, where people just expect him to be a hero and don't even pay any credence to his claims to be a villain. And we started with the origin story, aptitude, and then got the 5 stages, which are where we take Chad through the 5 stages of grief of accepting that he's going to villain school. And then Greg gets pulled aside by his guidance counselor to be given the steps to being the worst villain of all time ever. 5 steps being the worst villain of all time ever. And so we introduced within that a villainous character that Chad would have, Greg would have a super maladaptive relationship with. Pardon me, I'm burping here. And that was Jagged Princess. And so our intention was for Jagged Princess to see here. I think it's this one here. Nope, not that one. No, that's not the chapter, the page number. It's for Jagged Princess to decide that, where is that not on the... I guess it is on the first page of the story. Here, where Jagged Princess decides you're my new boyfriend. She's she's bossy. She's super strong. She's got no respect for anyone else, and so she just decides that this nerdy new kid is her main squeeze, and that's supposed to be this terrifying mismatch of relationships. And Greg's intended the girl that he has a crush on is Rapunzel, and which is one of she's in the year below, but she's one of the students that is in Chad's homeroom, basically, and which is on field day. I got off on a thing earlier. I was talking about how field day was our first kind of long story, because originally when we were doing this as Mad, they were all supposed to be super short stories, so we could punch the whole gags in a few pages. But by the time we got to field day, it ended up being 20 pages without even trying, and it was a whole thing. So we have Greg spots Rapunzel, who's that little red-haired girl, which of course is a nod to Chris's favorite Charlie Brown there. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, so that was supposed to be this weird love triangle that we were playing with between these characters. But what we ended up finding is that we just sort of, as the stories moved along, we didn't intend Chad to become more heroic, being surrounded by heroes. In the beginning of the stories, he's just a jerk to everyone, and he's got some friends that they just continually expect him to live up to a different standard, and he starts to, and that we didn't expect him. But what we really didn't expect is we have a story that where Chad ends up with like secretly dating Jagged Princess for various reasons, and they would just the chemistry that those characters have had on the screen or on the page was just something we absolutely never imagined could have happened, and I was really surprised to kind of see how the histories we'd written for these kids and where they'd been in the world kind of shaped themselves up to being this couple in a way that I don't think any of us saw coming with it.
Wow.
And so yeah, that surprised me entirely. So
I have a similar related question. Not character arc, but is there a character that between being tossed around and designed and actually being used end up being completely different than the original design?
You mean like visually?
No, I mean even like how it's used. Like maybe they came up with the design or whatever. It's like this is what we want the character to be. But then when you actually got to the executions, like maybe their personality or their actions or something was actually different than the original intention.
Well, I mean, yeah, and not in terms of character growth, but just in terms of how it played out on the page, huh? I think the one of the things is Jagged Princess's mother, Titania, who is the guidance counselor over at Hero School. She's a retired superhero. She's a lot more complex than we intended. We just wanted to portray her as this like clueless, mentally absent, goody two shoes, naive kind of thing.
Like somebody who just fell into the position of being a guidance counselor.
Well, and also because she just constantly had this like boundless belief in good things, and so when we see her playing off against her daughter who's going through like this identity crisis in high school, who's in active rebellion, and we see her with Chad who's like a sleazebag kind of a guy in the beginning of the story, where suddenly it's like that she just is blind to all that kind of stuff. And it was one of those things where she's a lot more complex than we imagined. And the ways, even the reason that she like puts on this smiling face is really like way more complex than we intended.
Could you explore that process a bit more? Like, it's really interesting to hear you describe these surprises you're going through.
So I guess here's part of how let me give a visual example from an old page.
Yeah.
We get to that thing over here. And it's actually like in that field day story that we were working on there. But it hadn't really fleshed out entirely, but it's one of those things that kind of first showed up in field day. So one of the premises in field day is that let's see if I can find the page right. Okay, first little background of the story. One of the things that is an element in field day is that heroes and villains are going out for a field day to pick their nemesis, who they'll do projects with through the course of their academics. So once this loads up, I'll go ahead. It's trying right now. I don't know if somebody else is using my internet or whatever, but Jagged Princess is jealous because Greg's talking to Rapunzel, and they get into this big knockdown, drag out fight, right? And And so that's going on in the background through some of this story. Okay. But while this is all going on, the teachers at Hero and Villain School are let's see, that's the page ahead of where I wanted to be. Is it this one? Oh man, I can't remember what it is here. But they're having they're out at coffee. So so they're anyway, the Hero and Villain teachers are out at coffee. And oh, come on. Okay, hang on. Sorry guys. I don't have anything prepared here. So
can I speak? So you're talking about like it. So it's really interesting to hear like the in-universe perspective here. But what's neat is I'm trying to think, and I'm sure the chat is thinking the same thing. It's like, how is Chris and Matt? It's always two creators. So how is that surprise dynamic happening? How is that playing out? Is Matt drawing it slightly differently over time, which encourages the writing to change? Or both of them kind of pitching each other ideas, calling each other on the phone and saying, "Hey, I just thought of this."
When this was going on, we were in the same town when we were working on this story specifically, and so like all of this we wrote in one night, or no, it was over the course of 2 days. It was just after I bought my house. We were having the electrical redone in the place. My family went to stay with my in-laws for a week. And so I went over for a while and just, hung out at Chris's and ate pizza and wrote. Wow. Yeah, we took a long weekend and just did that. And so we played video games and whatever else while we were doing it too.
That's a whole other dynamic. So you have a wife and several children throughout this whole story.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So on this particular weekend, we hammered out this particular story.
You have no excuse, chat, by the way, just so you know. Anyway, continue.
Well, we were working on this particular story, and things like this moment where we wanted to have this moment. So the hero teachers and the villain teachers are hanging out. They're copacetic for the most part, right? And they're having this very boring conversation going on here. And then we introduce Titania's twin sister, Donna Matrix, into the dynamic, which causes this conflict of vision about who and how Jagged Princess is going to be, right? So then, as we're working this conversation out, and he's sitting at the typewriter, and I'm pacing around the apartment, and we're talking about what these characters' motivations are going to be and what kind of things they're going to say. We worked on pretty much the way we do is like I'd either come up with a line of dialogue and he'd edit it, or he'd suggest something and then we'd back and forth it and we'd edit it like on the go, and we'd write up our scripts with real loose panel descriptions. Then Chris would pencil and I'd ink, and so we were both of us were involved in every aspect of the making of it of these early stories.
Okay, so you're both credited as artists.
Yep.
Here. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Typically, he did most of the pencils, and I did most of the inks. But sometimes he inked himself, and sometimes I penciled and he'd ink. So it kind of depended on what people's real life was like at that time, what we could deal with at the time. So anyway, so as we're having this out, we've got this situation where these two sisters who have different opinion about Jagged Princess, the girl in common, and and as they're discussing what they know and don't know, and who really knows what's going on, we start realizing that like we just put it down because we thought it was good drama, that it was going to really append to the next page, which is where Jagged Princess is about to kill a Rapunzel, right? There's this moment of the whole thing, and we're like, okay, this is where it's all coming undone. Titania sneaks into or steps in to interrupt that, and there we have this very typical moment where you know, it's not, you're my daughter and I love you. No one asked you to, right? Real angsty teenage drama stuff we want to put in there. But as we start working it, just the way we were writing the dialogue and working out these things, realized that like there's more to Titania than just this, you know, sunshine and rainbows naivete, right? Like that's a front, right? And we haven't explored why that is, but that's a front that she's putting on. And I mean, I know why, we know why, but we haven't explored that on the page yet.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see it though. It really plays out, because I think one of the best written stories that you have is probably the birthday party.
Oh, that was so much fun. Yeah, it's called Happy Birthday, All Your Friends Are Here. And I will brag on one thing on that real quick. I'm not going to get into the whole story on it, but if you let me see here, where is it? Oh, here it is. This cover image I painted on a real canvas.
Oh, neat.
Well, it's a canvas board. I did do some digital correction to make it more balanced, because I'm not very good at things. But this actually exists, and it can be yours for, well, I'm not selling it. So, but yeah, I really like this story. But yeah, it really was a situation where, while it's still really funny, it's also a situation where almost everything that's said is just a raw nerve that's being poked at. And
wow.
and so yeah, it's pretty crazy. I really like this story. Also, I'm going to go ahead and share. This is page 3 of 2 of the story. Page 3 starts with one of my favorite exchanges between Chad and Jagged Princess. It didn't pick it up here. Go ahead and click that over there. Please come, because Jagged Princess is being forced to a birthday luncheon with her mom and her aunt at a local pizza parlor. And so she can invite her friends. And I don't have any friends. Oh, but I have, please, you've got to come rescue me. But your mom is a hero. What do you need rescue from? My mom. I need you to rescue me from my mom.
Yeah.
I like this page because the two buddies in the background switch places.
Well, it's because it's changing angles.
Yeah. But like it's a very dynamic position, because they're basically sitting in the same pose. It's just from different perspectives, and I think it's a really good page.
Thank you.
That's really fun.
Yeah, that was Chris's page mostly. So
yeah, that's pretty clever.
Also, I'd like to point out that Greg is reading Physics for Evil Geniuses. So that's one of my that's my kind of joke.
Just as an aside, so like Magic School Days was really big, obviously, because of Harry Potter, but other stories too. Like, is there an element to Forces of Good and Evil that you're playing with in that arena specifically? Like, are you thinking about Harry Potter? Are you playing against that archetype at all?
Not as the project as a whole. We do have a character called Henry Hunter that is one of the in this year that these stories take place in, the school year of 2004-2005. He's a freshman at Hero School, and he's an exchange student coming from Britain, and he's made to be a knowing joke to the Harry Potter Tim Hunter kind of thing.
Tim Hunter 100% looks like Harry Potter.
Yeah, he 100% looks like Harry Potter, but Tim Hunter was a Harry Potter character that Neil Gaiman developed for. Hang on a second, I got to deal with my dog.
Yeah. That's
also,
right.
I feel like Twitless And maybe his partner Cartoonicus are probably the only people that can actually get away with that joke, since they deal with the exact same thing.
Yeah, Sky High, but I never noticed the heraldic logo and how it's got like a Harry Potter vibe until this stream. So had me wondering. He probably heard that, but we can't hear him.
No, I didn't. I was laughing at his comment here.
Oh, yeah.
So, but no, we was that Tim Hunter was a wizard student from the Books of Magic series that Neil Gaiman did for DC in the 90s. And he had based the story on a pitch, or not a pitch, but a concept that he'd worked on from years and years before and hadn't done anything with. So, so yeah, that was and then Harry Potter was almost looked exactly like the Tim Hunter drawings from the Books of Magic. So that was our joke with all of that. But it wasn't like the school setting. Chris has really felt like his inspiration for wanting to do the school story was he was a huge fan of Saved by the Bell.
Oh, fun.
Yeah. And so like a lot of that kind of dynamic is the stuff that Chris brought to his thoughts on the thing. I just thought that like, and for me, a lot of my inspiration with the way we wanted to play with the characters came down to the way that Peter David had written in Young Justice, where there's lots of jokes, but the action is genuine superhero action, and the jokes are still there. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So that was kind of the way I was taking it with it. And I just like the idea of, I've always loved sidekicks. So the idea about doing like that's a big factor in all that. But those were, so when it comes to like things I was surprised by, the relationship with Jagged Princess and Chad, and how they just kind of grew together to be a couple, how that impacted the people around them, and how like the idea that, you know, that it's secret, and the reasons it's secret were things that I didn't expect. I didn't anticipate Titania being as in depth as it is. As we've written more exposition or stories, we've worked on that some. One of the big things about that character was he was very tragic in the beginning. And Barry and I have done some plotting. We're trying to get some other stuff done first, but we've done some plotting on some stories. And I was very content to leave X being a very tragic figure. And Barry said that everybody should have a chance at redemption. And it really kind of shook the way I was looking at the character. And I went to look back at that whole storyline and think of ways of dealing with that. If we ever get around to exploring his story more, has a lot of stuff in that can be addressed in, I think, good ways. So it's crazy, but I really look at like these characters and try to spend time with them, and you know, figure out how their lives and voices are in things, and really live in their heads as they live in my head. So I don't think I don't necessarily think that's healthy, but it's been going on for 20 years, so I don't think I can stop.
Yeah. I mean, you're in good company. I don't think anyone's doing this for health. Well, yeah. So that's cool. So where so you've talked about the past. You want to tell us more about the present and the future? What stories are you working on now? Like, where would you like to go?
Well, stories? Like I said, with Forces, back in, I want to say it was 2000. I was looking at what was actually selling And I've come to realize that fewer and fewer people recognize this as a comic, right? Although Sport Band's hilarious, but this people don't necessarily know that this is a comic. Whereas this is what a lot of people look at as a comic.
Yeah.
So
manga.
Yeah. Then that size, even like your
little digest
things,
boy.
Bad Guys, the Dog Man, those things. That's what people look at. Thing. Okay, one thing to address, said in the chat: irredeemable villains are the best. No one's redeeming Cobra Commander. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with that, but that's I was thinking about redeeming heroes. So
what about irredeemable heroes? Let's give that a try.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, we've got some in the wings too, but that's a somewhat of a different story. So yeah, I am gambling on the on Forces. We've got so much content. The idea of producing a tankobon sized, manga sized volume,
really
would be we're taking the first like roughly 200 pages, and I'm going to do it as a tankobon size thing, and try to take it to some cons. That's kind of what we're looking at, is maybe do some crowdfunding, but also like taking it to some conventions, seeing if people can take a look at those and see them as a comic and pick them up and say, oh hey, there's these teen heroes in school, and I can dig on that a little bit, and oh look, it's sort of funny. And
and it's hefty.
Yeah. Yep. So although Mrs. H sort of beat me to the punch, it's a different story, but yeah, that very thing. So she's just much faster than me. I just finished the 122 page mark in the first volume, so having to reformat art and change all the layouts. We never intended Forces to be printed, so it's all, every page is a different size. They're all 800 pixels wide by whatever we felt like.
Yeah.
So it becomes an entirely different beast to reformat.
Yeah, I'm glad I went in with some intentions in that regard. It made things a lot easier.
Well, part of our idea was that Forces would just stay free forever, as that that thing to hand out to folks to pick up. But I don't think that's been successful. Then I got 2 decades into that thing, so dadgummit, we're gonna try to see if we can't find an audience for it. So other things I'm working on, I've got a Forces one shot that was penciled by my friend Rolf, who passed away last year, and inked by my son Taliesin, and I'm working on coloring and lettering that. And that is, it takes place within Forces, the continuity, that year one continuity, but it's not something that's been published so far. It's been hinted at in stories, but it's called I've Been to Hell. The title of which was taken from an old Breton folk song. And so that's gonna be a fun story.
So are these new scripts that you're adding to the story world, or are they stories you've had in the works for a long time and now you're getting to draw them?
It's a little of both. Little of both. I talked about A Reason to Believe. That one, the whole first act has been rewritten. We changed, because I changed the entire outline of the first act, and so the whole first act's been rewritten. Different characters have been shaded around. So the normal girl is her name is Betsy, and Elizabeth there, Betsy, her mom was a character in the first version, and she doesn't exist in the second version. And I mean, she exists, but she never shows up. And so like things like that have been changed. But
It's funny you've got characters that never show up but exist. That's I think we're all learning to accept that the story world of what Ideal Comics tackles is always going to be bigger than what's on the page, which is fun. I don't think I've ever come up with a character that isn't going to be on the page. Maybe because I'm lazy. I don't know.
I think breathing worlds need that though. Like if you want your world to feel like it's alive, it's kind of like they've gone downhill, but the way they used to be. Kevin Smith's films were all filled with like stories of characters that you never saw in the movie, but they existed to relate the characters.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know he did that.
Yeah, he would also do that to like share his universe together, right? Like there'd be a story about a guy who ended up breaking his neck for a very heinous activity that I'm not going to mention on stream, but like that his death and funeral would be talked about in like 3 or 4 different movies. And not only did it connect the world, it also let you know the characters more because of their reaction to that story.
And the thing, the people that they knew in common.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think any breathing world will eventually have stuff like that. Like maybe you could end up in a circumstance where that story ends up being shown at some point in time, but I think there will always be tales or friends or like somebody will mention their aunt and there's no point in ever actually showing their aunt.
Right. Well, and like one of the things that like, and to be honest, like prior to Clerks 2, I was a pretty big Kevin Smith fan. And that breed of pop culture referencing was something that had a big impact on the way I thought about that kind of property. And there are definitely some shades of that sort of thing in the way Forces addresses some of those issues. So
which is and of course he's a big comic book fan. So like even what you're describing is a story world that is influenced by how American comics have been shaped.
So even the way that like Chad is a huge fan of like 80s new wave bands, you know, I mean like that's like for some reason like that worked its way into the story when he's easily 15 years too young to have cared about 80s new wave bands. So, but there's something got ended up putting up there. But looking at things in the future, there's always projects. I've got like Golden Age adventure, like mystery horror stories that I've got some scripts that need finished or need drawn. I've got we've got classic Golden Age superhero action stuff we want to get to if anyone is interested. Of course, I want to finish I've got several Buckskin Boone stories that have I've got one that story that Rolf did the story for, and I'm dialoguing. Before he was involved in a really bad car wreck a couple of years before he passed away, and he for a while he could still draw, but he couldn't ink his stuff at all, and so that's why Tolly ended up inking that I've Been to Hell. There's also Buckskin Boone story that I will be inking. I was hoping to get to this year, but that's not going to happen this calendar year.
Can I just point out, it's fun to hear you guys even talking about a web comic with an inker and a penciler is very I don't, that's funny to me, but it's very like it's something I appreciate about what you guys
in a lot of ways
it's a hybrid.
We're a product of an older time, right?
Sure.
So like when we published volume our Zing #1 in 2006, you know, the normal person didn't have access to like big bed scanners. There weren't any places in town that had big bed scanners. Our newspapers still used photo transfer for that kind of stuff.
Oh,
And
funny.
their,
Yeah.
and their cost for using a photo transfer was cost prohibitive. So what we did with all of our, and we had all of our art drawn, you know, on the 11 by 17 paper or whatever, and was all hand drawn. And then sometimes it was hand inked, sometimes it was digitally inked. In that first book was a kind of a hodgepodge of things, and then it was photo reduced on photocopy machine, and then scanned in. Yeah, and so our first edition.
You've got good reason to talk about an inker and a penciler because
So
these are traditionally drawn web comics.
Yeah, a lot of them
That's
are.
funny.
And in fact, I've got a cabinet in the next room that has art from our different projects, some web, some print, but it stands about this tall of just paper.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, it's crazy. I need to go through and sort it so we can actually find stuff. I have this archive bug. But and some of the pages and stuff will be ending up in the manga sized Forces Volume 1. We'll be doing some behind the scenes stuff, pages and stuff that's going to go in there. That's gonna highlight some of that kind of stuff on back matter kind of things. But anyway, yeah. So we did all that, and actually with that, one of the things that was really frustrating was that in the way we could do it, my wife inked the first Al Jin story, and a lot of her fine details disappeared in the photo reduction, and and it looked kind of muddy on the first two printings, and then we didn't have another printing until 2017, I think. It was 16. Well, the technology in between times got way better. Like during the first printing, the highest resolution that print companies would work with was 300, right? And now they'll work with higher. But the technology improved, and so we had access to a big bed scanner. So I rescanned all of the art from that first story, and then reduced it digitally. And it's so much better. It saved tons of the detail work that Amy had put into the piece, and we relettered it, and it was really good. I'm really happy with how that shook out. So
before we lose it, could you, just for the purpose, like for documenting some of this history here, so you've got a whole zine side quest that you guys were doing over the years. Like, could you speak to that for a little bit? Like, what
mini comics, right? So what happened with all of that was, this is 2016. Barry and I decided we were going to try to make it to some local cons, and we hadn't gotten a print project finished in years. We've been working on Forces, been working on some other web stuff, some mini comics that are up on our website. In fact, if you go to Global Comics, the Ideal Comics page, and look for the short box, a bunch of our mini comics are up there. Some are free, some are not. But with that, we wanted something we could just take out there. So we came up at our first show. I met Dan Connor, and Dan Connor, who created My Gal the Zombie and has worked on Ninja Turtles and colored something big for Chuck Dixon and Frank Fosco, I think is his name, and just made it to like the New York Times bestseller list for all ages graphic novels for the story Battle for the Pumpkin King, Nightmare Before Christmas prequel story. Anyway, before all that happened, I ran into him at this con, and he was doing little ash cans, zine style ash cans comics that were just printed on photo paper and folded in half on photocopier paper. Just just like went down to the Kinko's and made these little 12-page mini comics, and I was just like blown away. I was just so we had always loved, and one of the reasons we went with the anthologies back in the day, Chris and I, was that we felt like back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, if you were getting into comics, you had to have a good backup comic game. You had to be able to write these short, punchy stories and prove yourself before you could get a feature, right? And so when Chris and I were working on our thing, we decided that we'd try to do that same sort of thing, and hone the 8-page story and try to get the most out of it. And so that's one of the reasons with the anthologies we had 8 to 12-page stories within those. Well, flash forward all these years later, and I'm seeing Dan Connor with these little ash can photocopier comics, these little zine style things, and I'm like, man, that's amazing. We got to do that. So we did. We made some little coloring book style stories. We made little like mini stories, just trying stuff out to try to see what in different genre pieces, trying to see what would get people interested in stuff. And the idea that you could just take your flash drive down to Staples and print a whole run of books yourself and sell them for $1 was really an entrancing idea to me. Because it was kind of marrying these two traditions, right? The DIY comics with an X tradition and the backup story superhero universe kind of thing. And so
yeah, absolutely,
that was one of those things. And along that thought process, I ended up meeting a guy named Philip Echevarria down in Colorado, who had done like the same kind of thing with punk rock comics back in the early 80s. And I was just like, this is amazing. So I think part of the appeal also comes the fact that neither Chris and I could draw very well, and the idea that there doesn't have to be a barrier to entry if you're just doing it on something like that, because it's appropriate to the medium. It's one of those things like back in the early aughts, there was this big push to get everything into a hardcover, right? And a lot of stories that I didn't think deserved a hardcover, right? Like not to speak ill of the man himself, but Kevin Smith's Green Arrow Quiver story was good, but it wasn't hardcover good. Now I bought it in hardcover because it was half price at like a Borders or something.
Yeah.
So
a second Charles.
Yeah. So I mean, if I can get a $15 book for $7, I'll do it.
Yeah, I think we need to go back to taking the paperback and trade paperback more seriously, because I think if we did more tankobons, almost any story you could put into a paperback after there's enough chapter. I don't think it deserves a hardcover either.
Right. Yeah. And that's why. But if you got something, so for me, with my own mind, if you got something with a hardcover, right, and it's not like, if the story doesn't deserve it either on the art level, or on the content level, then and once again, I mean, this Phil Hester's art in Quiver was remarkable, but it's not more remarkable than Jim Aparo in Detective Comics from a decade before that, right? So I think there's something for that, but I look at but I think that's just part of the language that I was thinking at the time. So then I'm looking at what am I bringing to the table with Forces, with our style, with the products that we can produce quickly, with the stories that we can tell, and that kind of ash can, comic really felt like a natural fit with our own at that point a decade's worth of DIY under our belts. We're just kind of putting it together to kind of give a little extra texture on this. So we did digital lettering for years. I was using an ancient copy of Paint Shop Pro version 8, which, if you don't know,
nice.
was the last version that Jask produced before selling the whole company to Corel. So it was the last full version of that software.
Corel, wow.
And I opened up Paint Shop Pro to get some old files last weekend.
That's great.
So
I use Corel Painter,
Windows 11 machine,
and that was quite a thing.
Yeah,
I
I
used
think
to use
anyone's
Corel Painter
tried.
too.
Oh yeah, you remember that? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Corel they had a good lineup.
So we're looking at these. So we're using secondhand machines and ancient softwares and all that kind of stuff just to keep it going. So that nature of do it yourself to the next level, where you're actually printing and stapling the books by hand, that just felt like a natural evolution for us. So there you go.
That's fun, because I think it sounds like you guys have adapted to new technology, or maybe the cheaper availability of already established technology. Like, you're willing to explore, because I know some creators, they get frustrated where their projects take longer than they see technology kind of evolve underneath their feet, and it can change the production process. It can change the art, and frustrate them. But it sounds like you guys have always had a generous spirit, I guess, when it comes to how you're going to handle these approaches. And
trying to figure it out. I mean, it's just like,
hey, Twitless,
we just kind of make it up as we go. So, hey man,
Yeah.
how's it going?
good way to do it.
Doing okay. I thought I'd pop in and say hey.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming. So,
Yeah.
Matt's been bugging me about all the real world stuff, and
I've been watching from chat.
Yeah. It's been crazy.
I have a question. It's kind of like it's more like a trap than a question.
Oh, I love it.
So.
Go for it.
Trap him.
I want to put a bug in your ear, and it's totally probably not a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway because I've never one to look a bad idea in the mouth. So, and I say this, and like I said, it's probably the worst idea ever, but I still like it. So are you familiar with Alberto Martinez?
Man, that name sounds really familiar. Let's say no.
Okay, he goes by Elasmat, and his big crowning achievement is Road Warrior Drake.
Right.
And I want to see, and like, I'm not saying like everything about you like meshes, but what I am saying is that there is I think Matt Crotts knows what I'm talking about, but there is like there's a zeitgeist or a certain animating spirit that I see operating very similarly in your work on Forces and Joe Jobs in particular, and in his work, and what
similar whimsy factor or something, and
it's the underground comics with an X it factor. Here's the thing, like Alberto's work is very rough in some ways, and yet he still produced there's a guy I do reviews with named Aldous, and it's one of the few, his work, Road Warrior Drake, is one of the few works that he and I both agree as something that like it's almost like its own category that exists. We both and many of us have acknowledged it's lightning in a bottle, and it's hard to even classify it because his artwork's really rough. It does not meet the standards that you typically look for in comics, but he's capturing something. And in the way that you structure jokes, this sort of punk rock aesthetic, the DIY aspect, even I think in some of you how you pace things, like there's so many similarities. And at least in my opinion, what do you think, Matt? Do you agree?
Matt Crotts.
Sorry, sorry, I meant Matt Crotts. I'm just.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
I'd love. Yeah.
Okay, so the trap I've got
trap them.
Yeah, so the trap I've got is I was like, I want to see you talk to Alberto, because I feel like that there, you know, there's some, if you the fact that you're so similar and channeling such similarities, I was like, you know what, I'm wondering if there's any
yeah, they could jam together probably.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's kind of what I'm going at. Yeah, that's that was my trap essentially.
Yeah. It might be interesting to check out. Yeah, I mean, I've heard similar things about Road Warrior Drake, the inexplicable, I don't even know, I can't even think of the word right now, but the
like outsider perspective.
Well, the words are escaping me at the minute. My vocabulary is not working right at the moment.
It's definitely outsider art, I think.
Yeah.
And that's partly of what, I mean, that's kind of what underground comics with an X does.
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And that's something that I've noticed not just in your work, but people who have praised your work. So again, there's a part of me that just kind of wants to, like, you know, take the two action figures and just kind of, you know, jam them together and see what happens.
That's hilarious.
So I'm just throwing that out there. Like, he is, he's, I mean, I'm not saying that like everything about you guys like meshes. Like, he's a huge CG guy, and he is like unapologetically that way, and he's also like really, I'd say he's pretty vulgar. Is probably the term. But I see the crucifix he wears, so there's like there's that angle too, and so he's actually he's one of the nicest guys in that scene, I think.
Yeah, he really is.
He plays this role of being, he's very much into playing roles, because he's kind of an amateur filmmaker too, and so a lot of stuff he does on the internet is this like internet persona stuff. But behind the scenes, he's just a really, in my experience, he's just like a quiet, very nice sort of fellow. And I'll say this partly because like I almost and then we'll get back to you, obviously. But
that's fine, man.
I didn't do this to derail anything. I was just, like I said, it was just you know, you said ask me questions, and so this is a question that occurs to me, and I'm like, I keep on wanting to jam this together. So I'll just stop there. So
no, that's fine. You're fine, man. I appreciate the idea, and this kind of goes back to it was a private conversation that we had, but I think that anybody who has paid attention to you for any length of time knows what a fan you are of building bridges, and and so I don't think that comes off as a surprise to anyone, which is fine. I appreciate I appreciate that about you. So even though I'm a big fan of burning them, so
I wasn't gonna say it. I was trying to think of how to. I don't know, burning. I just think you probably built your bridges in 2004, 05, and you don't need to build any new ones. I feel like
it's more like a drawbridge. He just keeps it reeled up.
Or maybe that's
there you go.
No,
it's just there. It's just not down.
I'm waiting for somebody to throw a cow over my battlements. That's
there you go. No, I'm just saying, like, I guess the simplest way to put it is that this indie scene, I think, is can use that energy, and so it's cool to see people like you and him doing that. And so, you know, I think you know, there's potentially some potential, no idea, but I think about creator. I think Alberto is one of the strongest ones. I think George Peter Gatsis might be another.
Yeah.
Who's also channeling that really underground outsider comics with an X energy, and
he's in like the Lorenzo Sleestack corner.
That's right. Yeah.
Lorenzo was in the chat earlier.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's some orbiting, there's some connections there, so like creators like that, I think, just from the creative side. I'm not saying the personality side, but from the creative side, I see connections there. Seven says, "Isn't Road Warrior Drake a duck book?" It's so funny because if you say that, like Alasmac goes into fake temper tantrums. He's like, "Road Warrior Drake is a beast citizen. He is not a duck, and he like will fight you, like air quotes. He will fight you."
This sounds vaguely familiar to me. I think I may have talked to him once when he was doing like a campaign run, and I was on Rick Piper's channel interviewing him with Rick.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, that's possible.
But it was so long ago, I don't remember the temperament or anything about this guy. I just remember talking about the book.
Yeah, no, it's so to bring it back to your work, I just, like I said, I see this comics with an X thing, and I know that's not necessarily. I feel like your work is maybe this is a question I can ask. Do you? No, actually, no. I'll ask it this way. Okay, so if you had, let's say there are two roads. Okay. Kind of like that meme where the guy's like, which way Western Man, and one way is like to Disney World, one way is to the haunted house. So if you're at that crossroads,
the haunted house in Disney World, haven't you been?
Lol.
Sorry.
So
sorry. That's my trap.
And to Seven, we flood his chat with duck memes all the time. So what I'm saying is this: if you had the choice, okay, at this point, and the left road, which goes to Disneyland, is the road that basically is you get an artist who draws in the register of typical superhero work, and it's affordable. You can you can get your work in that register of your John Byrne, your Romita's, like the typical kind of superhero register. So you have that, or you have the opportunity to continue down the pathway of the comics with an X, where like you're either drawing it yourself and using that kind of outsider and amateur art energy, or you're working with people who have similar skills, like I said, like Alberto and so on. At this point in your career, which path do you choose? Which one do you gravitate towards?
100% yes. That's the answer. Because here's the thing: is I've always been the person who I want like the story to fit the artist, right? I look at it in a way where like I think this kind of story you're going to tell is going to vary based upon who's participating in it and how it's going to work out, because it's story and words and art all together. Like that's comics, right? So like Forces has always got to look kind of cartoony, right? To do the kind of things I want to do with it. But like if I could afford like a John Byrne guy, man, that would be a great guy for like expositioner stories, right? Like that would be the classic superhero look, would fit in great with that.
Well, let me pivot the question though. Okay, so like so I want to actually ask an even more challenging question. Let's say you could only choose one of those avenues. Let's say you had to basically choose, okay, we're either going, I either get, like the genie only gives you one avenue, right? The genie in this case, Al Jin shows up and he gives you a wish here. And your own character.
He doesn't grant wishes. That's not how it works.
That was my dad joke trap. So like your genie character shows up. No. So the point here is that you can only really choose, and you can only choose like one pathway forward, and one of them is going to keep you in the spirit that you have now with that kind of outsider art energy, but it's going to keep you with that authenticity. I'm dropping all of Matt Crotts' favorite words today. So that authenticity that you have earned through a long career of that animating spirit, or you got to get the more mainstream legitimacy that would either be that you would access by having the more what we call quote unquote real artist. If you were gun to your head kind of situation, which road is more consistent? Which one would you feel like you wouldn't be sacrificing on your current work, and like which one do you choose?
So here's a really I think this is a
That's the real answer.
That sounds like a nightmare.
That is the end run right there. Around the wishing for more wishes thing. So I think I want to answer your question by way of analogy, if you'll allow me. Okay. Are you familiar with the Jack Reacher stories?
I've seen advertisements for Jack Reacher. That's about as far as.
Okay. So, about a decade ago, Tom Cruise executive produced 2 Jack Reacher films.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he starred as Jack Reacher.
I think I vaguely remember this. Yeah.
Okay. They were good. But Reacher is supposed to be 6'5", 250 pounds of muscle, just this beast of a man.
Right.
Right. But you can't do that in the movie theater because they need star power.
Yep.
So if Tom Cruise is producing your picture, you let Tom Cruise play Jack Reacher, and a couple of camera tricks makes him look almost 6 feet tall. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Amazon.
I'm fascinated by this metaphor and how you're going to land it.
Okay.
It's going to be good.
In Amazon released a series based on the same properties.
I've seen those advertisements. Yeah. They got this huge guy,
giant of a man to play Jack Reacher. He looks exactly right. And
I actually like that version.
In real life,
that version was great.
6'5" at least, right? Yeah. And I don't know if they got just midgets to play all the other characters. I don't know, but the dude looks right?
Yeah.
He looks right. He acts right. He nails it. But you couldn't do that. You can only do that on Amazon, only on streaming, where a small market is going to be able to pay for itself, right? You got to pare it down. You got to do with that kind of stuff in that context. Never going to be in theaters. The only way to do it is through something like an Amazon service, right?
Yeah.
But it's better, right? It was good.
Much better.
It was good. This is better. Okay.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of the thing when it comes to the stories I want to tell. I am interested in what I can do that is the best, right? And the story of all the stories I'm working on and have worked on and have in the tank, whatever, the one that I am the most vested in finishing is that Forces of Good and Evil, getting to the end of high school, of taking these kids to the end of high school. And that's that. And so whatever's going to be the best fit for that is what I'm most focused on. And if that means that, like, I will die in obscurity, get the very last, get that very last image on the very last page, and then I drop dead, scrawling it on the back of my notebook, because that's what I can do. That's what it is. I wouldn't want to follow the path of like, the big time property. This is sort of one of those things where, like, you see some other indie comics guys or whatever else, and they've got their passion project, and then they've got something else that they did just as a lark, and that catches fire, right? So like people love Nick Mueller's Winnie the Pooh stuff, right?
Right.
And you get a lot of positive take on that.
That's taken off, while Demon Hunter and Raven is, I'm not saying it's like fallen to the wayside, but it's definitely like,
interesting.
It's not his most popular property.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
And the thing is that with that is that because he's the artist, right? He can choose how he wants to budget that time, what's going to be the best as far as what's consistently generating enough income to allow him to keep drawing, right? And all that kind of stuff. So, and how he's going to look at marketing his different properties and his different things that are very different tonally, even though there are common themes in them, they are still very different tonally. How does he have to play with that, right? But by and large, I'm not the artist, right? Everything else. So the thing I feel is that the need to keep, while I want to work on other projects and while I want to look at other tones, I feel the need to keep forces plugging in some way, and And if that means that, like, right now I've got through at least this story, I've got this really, really great collaborative going on with Mrs. H. She understands my characters really well. We've come up with a few together. We just have a lot of good energy back and forth. But that might only last for this homecoming story because she's got other stuff going on, and I understand that that's a thing. If that ends and that's it, well, then it's back to me drawing it, because and if that means I don't get to work on, you know, these other stories and to tell those golden age stuff that I want to do and the all that kind of stuff, then that's just what it's got to be. Because
so part of what I'm trying to flesh out here, and I'm trying to ask, like, you know, hard questions, but like good hard questions. And part of what I'm trying to get at is that, like, because you have committed to, you know, a kind of like admittedly unskilled art approach that has given your work a flavor. You know, it is a kind of flavor that you can't new coke it, I think, in some ways. Or you could maybe, but like there are consequences for new coking it, as it were. And so kind of what I'm trying to flesh out here, because like one of the things that, because I think one of the pieces that I'm still the most fascinated by, and one of the comic I like the most is Zing. I like Zing 1 and 2, but I think one of your best pieces that just like is just from an artistic point of view is the Joe Jobs one.
Oh yeah.
And Joe Jobs, in my opinion, would not be Joe Jobs without the more amateur art. The fact that it's kind of an amateur art aspect to it gives it a flavor it wouldn't have. And because your oeuvre at this point has a kind of flavor to it, the question I'm trying to ask is do you think, I mean, on the one hand, we would all love to work with John Byrne at some point. Like, I get that. Like, but setting that aside, to work with artists of that quality is definitely something we all want to do. But my question here is that for specifically Forces, because that's like the very long running work that you have, that has a history and has a flavor to it. What are your thoughts regarding the fact that if you were to, in fact, and this is something that like that I've also noticed with Elasmat and Alberto Martinez, the guy I was talking about with Road Warrior Drake. It's like, if you got like a real competent artist to draw this, I don't know if I'd be as interested in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like,
no thanks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And I'm like, you get it, but that's like it creates. So that's kind of what I'm asking here is, you know, if you had the chance to upgrade the art, how much would you actually upgrade the art because of the flavor that you have acquired that people have? Like, I remember, was it Cartoonicus? No, it wasn't Cartoonicus. There was someone from chat who said he showed Super Schooled and he showed Forces, and the guy said that he was attracted to Forces because of the outsider art perspective, and it was because of that underground comics energy, and it interested him in particular, that flavor. It's not a mainstream flavor, right? It's that basically it's the gas station beef jerky you get at only this one gas station, but you remember it. And the next time you're in the area, you go, I kind of want that thing again. I don't know why, but I do.
Which is interesting because what Matt said his aspirations were what was to be the next, and he named a bunch of big two writers. So you were thinking, just to bring it full source, like the ultimate story of Ideal Comics is the story of Matt Reese, I think. And you started, your origin story was, I want to make it in the big time. And where we're landing at this chapter of your story is you're saying that would be at cross purposes, I guess, with your interests. In the sort of stories you want to tell. Like, well, so that's really interesting.
It's 100%. Like, I mean, like, this is something that you know, I've talked about with I think on stream with like Brian Ball. When Brian was young, he's like, you know, wouldn't be great to do Spider-Man, and now he's like, I don't know, Nick, similar thing I think with Spider-Man. It was like, but now forget it. There's no amount of money that would get me to write Spider-Man.
That's funny.
Yeah. And I mean, I would, and that's how I feel too. Like, I wouldn't, like my dream was to write Batman. My dream was to write Aquaman. And like, there's not amount of money that could bring me to write either of those properties. Now
that's
I don't know.
amazing.
If they
there is
called me,
enough money that
I'd still
there's
do.
enough-
I'd still do one. I would do at
Yeah.
least one just to put it on my resume.
there's
I would.
For you.
when it comes to like editing, I would do that. One thing I've accidentally ended up with doing is being involved on the editor's table for a few projects, and I really enjoy being able to help other people, keep their vision where they want it, and kind of offer that kind of stuff. I've really enjoyed that. So like, if somehow, like, Jim Lee showed up at my booth at the Fort Collins Comic-Con and said, "Hey, I read your editing on this book, and I got really good advice from whoever, and we'd love to have you on." Oh yeah.
See, I know why that is. So that gives you the power. I see. You wicked man, you. Because you want the power to tell these awful whippersnappers no, and then bring out all of the lore why they're wrong.
Well, it's more than power. It's the fact like I said, I've really enjoyed being able to help people like keep a purity to their vision, right? I've when it comes to like editing individual products, being able to dig down on what they think the characters are about, how they feel it is, how those things tie in, and then be able to say, well, if this is the path you're wanting to go on, well, here's some things that you're succeeding on it. Here's some things that you need to add a little more to it. This gag, this joke, this visual, whatever it is great, but it actually detracts from what you're trying to do in the big picture.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to help somebody build, and that comes back to like we're talking like in the first half of the show when we first took out with Ideal, we set all this behind the scenes stuff, all the timelines and the races and the way that history was changed because of the appearance of heroes or whatever else. And like I love that stuff. I loved that stuff. And being able to help other people walk through that has been great to me. It's like gardening.
That's a really that's the most it's a very philanthropic spirit you've got there. I know you paint yourself as the as a misanthrope, but that's a very philanthropic
it is
motivation. See through you, buddy.
Yeah.
Can't fool us.
That drawbridge is not fully raised up.
It's been turned into a motorcycle ramp. You're just gonna have to try really hard to get to the other side.
There you go. That's a great. I gotta say that is one of the best action scenes in any like action film. Right? You get that the raising bridge and that Duke Hazard jump over the top of it. Every time, I love it. I just rewatched. My children are both grown, and so movies that I always thought they would like, but it was too violent when they were younger. We're kind of getting around to watch some of them. So last summer, I showed the kids The Punisher, and that scene of The Punisher gets me every time. I love that bit. So anyway, side note. Unrelated.
So trying to think of what we haven't covered. So we've talked about past, present, and future.
I will tell you, there's one thing that we kind of what introduced this topic to begin with was a tweet exchange that I actually have loaded up here in a different screen. Let me get that.
Oh, nice.
So
between me and you, that's funny.
Yeah, between you and you, yeah. You were there was this who's contemplating the Stonehenge on the floor of Lake Michigan.
Oh,
and he
yeah.
shared these photos of these sunken bridges and fallen structures that are in Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
And I shared this. Myron Clamzo knows all about it.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you said, we got to stream together again. I want to hear about this story.
Mhm.
So there we are. Look, the first week after we finish our Scott pilgrimage, which is now. So that was one thing that was out there.
Is this a past, present, or future story?
This is a past story. This
Yeah.
this
So it's
Myron
already is in the vault.
Yeah. Well, this character we haven't seen anywhere that's made it to print yet. But
That's
the
amazing. So he's got
yeah.
there is a story. He's
Yep.
never been in a comic before.
He was the script was originally written to be part of Zing 2. We were
Okay.
going to make Zing 2 a 100-page giant, and the artist who was going to work on this moved on to other things in the years it took for us to work on the project, which is fine. And so that got put away in the vault, and other lore aspects were built into the background of the whole thing. But Myron Clamzo of the family Clamzo, the name inspired by a folk song written by well, the folk song was massacred by Arlo Guthrie, and the story of Reuben Ranzo and his strange daughter. But in typical Arlo Guthrie fashion, he turned it into like a 45-minute story about great clam attacks in post-colonial New England. And but I love the name so much I stole it. And Myron was at the time of the 1940s the heir to a tradition of subaquatic beings that live on the floor of Lake Michigan and protect the shoreline from sea monsters and a series of sea monsters. And he's this fish man that lives down there and with his family, but only one member of the way their society is only one member of the Clamzos ever comes up to the surface at a time, and they're the protector of the region. So that's the story there. That's but fun. I did not realize how many structures had fallen into Lake Michigan before that tweet thread came up, and the other things that they have found out there from when the lake was much lower and stuff that was there, prehistoric structures and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I think the pictures I shared are actually, like you said, just the detritus of the industrial age, but there apparently is some sort of pre-colonial Stonehenge type structure.
Well, and it's not very big. They're smaller stones, but they seem to be designed as a kill. I think some archaeologists think they're like a kill box for like antelope, for like deer and bison and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Because like herd animals will like act weird around structures, and so they think that just having these short structures around will cause the herds to break up and somebody to get confused in the mix, or some critter to get confused in the mix, and then that's the one they can kill. Could kill.
Oh, fun.
Either deer or bison or mammoths or something. So
there's a lot of ground to that, because just leaving a bucket or a barrel in the middle of a field will confuse an entire herd of cows.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Keep your cow fields clean, folks.
Well, if it's there all the time, then they start to understand that it's supposed to be there. But
it's something that's off. It's like it's never there.
Well, that's why, like if you work around livestock, especially around bulls, you've got to like move in a way that they expect you to be there, because if you startle them, they can turn real mad real fast. So I just saw Jim Tudor's comment. No, not today.
Well, hopefully, in the spirit of Twitless's bridge building, I think we talked about this last year. Honestly, it was about this time last year, but I'm in the spirit of bringing it up again. I think it'd be fun to explore doing cross collaboration on the comics with an X front, on the zine front, and I don't know, putting something together.
Absolutely. We've just been. I
Different
think we've all
folks,
just been waiting on you, man.
Yeah, and it took me like fulfillment. Curie 3 was like way too much of a saga. It's the worst yet.
I don't even know all the backstory with all of that, but it turned out really well. So.
Oh, thanks, but yeah, had to make it worth the wait, but it took most of a year. But now it's behind me. I only have 6 boxes left, and they're going out tomorrow.
Oh,
so
cool.
so let's zine it up, guys. I think this is the year. It's time for it.
All right. So. Sounds cool.
Sweet.
So with that, how did we do, Reese? Did we interview you well? Did we?
I don't know. I guess that's for the audience to decide if they felt like they got something in there and out of their worth. I mean, I could spend hours. I have spent hours talking about my favorite things. Yeah. And we didn't even hardly talk about like didn't hardly mention Joe Jobs. I didn't hardly, which was one of my babies. I had that project in mind for probably a decade before we got the first storyline done. And which isn't actually the first, but that's a whole different story. My hope for someday is to go through, however I get to it, and go through each of these different little crap jobs that Greg has had through the course of this 12 years between the time he graduated high school and the time that the current story happens. There's probably 1 or 2 more between there before during that phase of Greg's life. But yeah, I'd like to go through each little adventure at the different crap job he's had and how he gets fired from those different jobs. That's the or quits or whatever. So that's something I'd like to do at some point, but I've got to. That's looking for the right artist. Rico's stuff was just perfect for that story, and it was really great because he and I had very similar experiences working at fast food joints. 20 years before that, we worked on that, so we were pulling from even though we didn't work at the same place, we were pulling from this shared well of experience to talk about how awesome it is to work at Wendy's or in McDonald's.
It's a very particular flavor as well, because my experience was Chick-fil-A, and Chick-fil-A has a very distinct flavor to it that
peanut oil flavor.
Yeah, just the work environment though. It's similar, but it's very different. So
yeah, and I'm sure a lot of that has to do with like where it happened too, right? So I think one of the reasons that Rico and I worked at different places, but both here in Scotts Bluff, and so that was still part of the air that we had in common was because of those experiences. That's great. Jim says, "You hate cows. Stop hating cows."
I love cows in my stomach.
They're delicious. They're amazing. Amazing. So before we call it there, does anybody in the chat have any other questions about stuff or where you can waste your time? I mean, invest your time in reading my amazing comics.
If that cow comment was any indication, people in the chat may be several minutes behind.
Yeah.
7. What's 7 have to say? Oh, Jim Tuner's got an idea too.
What are your Batman ideas? Villains run the world. Oh, that realization is what sets him on that path to begin with. That's one of the Last Forces stories explores that particular dynamic. So
we're just pitting you against each other, so you ignore what we're doing.
So, Batman ideas, fewer Robins and more
spoilers.
More spoilers.
Oh. Like car spoilers?
No, it's Stephanie Brown. It's obviously another dad joke.
Yeah. It was a dad joke, but I found it hilarious. The one and the only, the original. Hey, since we're on the topic of Twitless, what did you think about Stephanie Brown as Batgirl? Did you ever read that run of Batgirl?
No, I'm more familiar. Like, I think my introduction to Stephanie Brown was War Games, which was probably not the best introduction.
No,
for her
it wasn't. Well, she was Batgirl after that, so
it's before that. War Games is when she dies. So
right.
After she got fired as Batgirl, became Spoiler, and then enacted his War Game thing, and then got everybody killed, and then herself. It's another post 9/11 story.
I don't think that's right. I'm pretty sure she was Batgirl just before the New 52, and she died. She died like in the late 90s.
Stephanie Brown.
Yeah.
War Games is 2004.
Not late 90s. It was 2000. Yeah, that's probably right. So, well, now I feel like I gotta look it up here. This is the best TV ever. You know what? We're not gonna do this live.
Okay.
That's stupid. Nobody wants to watch me Google things. That's dumb. Okay. So, that's the story. We're gonna go out and wrap it. Next week, no show because it's Thanksgiving and I'm taking time off to hang with the family. And then the following week, we are doing the Comics Creators Club. I talked about having ideas for Betty Kane Batgirl. It actually wasn't for Betty Kane as Batgirl. One of the pitches that I had gotten rejection letters from DC over was I had working with a guy I know named Russ. We had plotted this number of miniseries or sent that we were pitching to DC to try to get some interest on. That could be short stories or minis. One was a story that would pair Betty Kane Flamebird up with Azrael and compare both of them being cast out from their things to how that would work with their motivations. And so that was the frame on that. Yeah, so that was the plan on that. So I think it would have been really fun to play with these guys who this pair of people that didn't feel like they belonged but wanted to belong somewhere, and see how that shook out. But
wow.
I got zero traction on even an interest in hearing about that story, so nobody in DC ever got to see the pitch. So no, the cat from the Smurfs. Yeah, of course. Why not? The girl, a fire themed girl and her cat. Okay, so we're going to call that the show in 2 weeks. Comics Creators Club. We are looking at Ninu of the Dinosaurs and Oi, Tales of Bardic Fury. I've got the paper edition of that right here. We're looking at one particular story on it, not the entire, or one chapter on it, not like the entire 3-volume set. Although I highly recommend it. I love it. It's fun stuff. And then we're talking about Superman, talking about Green Lantern. It's going to be a fun December. So anybody else have anything they want to talk about before we hit the end stream button?
Yeah, buy my shirt.
Oh, buy his shirt. Yeah. That's right. Only available till the 15th of December, right?
Yep, and then I'm getting rid of it. It's the only time you got. Drop the link again.
So if you come back after the stream ends, I will put our links in the chat or in the thing over on YouTube. So, and we'll try to go from there. And then that's the story. So until next time, get out there and read some comics, especially mine. And we'll talk to you all next time around. Bye.
Peace out.